Good evening, everyone, members of the Nest, Words and Whimsy. Thank you all so much for joining us. We are so excited to have returning favorite author of ours, Tirzah Price, join us for another chat. Tonight, we're here to talk about her latest release, Manslaughter Park. Tirzah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be back.
We are so excited as well. Like we were saying before the chat started, you've been here a few times with us already. You know what we're about, what we're doing. We're so glad that it's worked out for you to come join us with all three books in the series.
Yeah, it's always fun. So I appreciate you asking me back.
Awesome. Well, for this is the first chat we've done with you since we have moved over to the Nest. So we've definitely got some members here that may not have seen your chats with us when we were streaming on Facebook. So for those members, could you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Tirzah Price. I write murder mysteries, murder mystery retellings of Jane Austen books in particular. So my first book was Pride and Premeditation, which is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice. My second book is Sense and Second Degree Murder. And this is a retelling of Sense and Sensibility. And then, of course, Manslaughter Park just came out this week. I'm getting confused about which side of the camera I should be leaning into. Manslaughter Park out now. And it is a retelling of Mansfield Park, which is one of Jane Austen's lesser read books. So that was really exciting to get to dive into that one. When I am not writing, I podcast and I write for Book Riot, and I have worked as an independent bookseller and as a public librarian. So I am all over in the bookish world.
You really are. You have or currently have or had your hand in so many different areas of it. It's exciting, and I bet gets to challenge different parts of your brain while still maintaining that theme of something you love.
Yeah, it's interesting to see all the different sort of aspects of like the bookish world. So the library aspect, as an independent bookseller for 7 years, and then of course the media aspect when I podcast and I write for Book Riot. But it's fun. It's all fun.
Last time we talked with you, we talked a little bit about the Hey YA podcast that you do. Will you tell us a little about the podcast and what episodes you might recommend new listeners start with?
Ooh, yeah. So I do the Hey YA podcast with my co-host Erica Azafetti, and she's fun. We have a lot of fun together. We are very casual. And we're very much like millennials who still love and read YA. So like we do kind of bring that perspective to it. But we usually, so we have new episodes every other week, and we usually start off by talking about like some news piece in the YA world. And then we usually have a topic where we will kind of do a deep dive into a topic, or we'll just like recommend a bunch of books on a topic, or we'll discuss various like trends and whatnot in YA. We also like every season we'll do a book club, so we'll both read the same book and then we'll just like gush about it for an entire episode. Those episodes are always really fun. We just did our favorite picks or favorite reads of 2023 so far, so that was a really fun episode. I'm like, my goodness, what have we talked about lately? Like what are our episodes? But I mean, we're all over the place. So basically, if you love YA at all, like any type of YA, hopefully you'll find something in there that will be enjoyable.
Having listened to the podcast, I definitely agree. I really like the extra credit episodes that you do, because it really you find great like niche genres that, not super niche, but like, things that are very specific. And there's something for everyone. There's just such a great variety. Sometimes it's specifically graphic novels. Sometimes you're talking about horror, which is always, something that I am intrigued. Both Leah and I
are just being like, yeah.
Excited for all of the horror books.
Yes. And so I forgot to mention too that we do extra credit episodes. So like our normal episode will be like 45 minutes long. 45 minutes to an hour. we've had to like cut ourselves off because our sound editor and our managing editor are like, you can't go over an hour. Like you can't. We're like, I was like, darn it. We could do podcasting for like 2 hours. So our episodes are usually between like 45 and 60 minutes, but then every other week, so on off weeks, we do like a 10-minute short form podcast. And yeah, that's kind of just like, and Erica and I trade on and off with those. So one week will be her and one week will be me. And it's kind of like our opportunity to be like, what like little tiny topic can we do in 10 minutes that like maybe won't necessarily sustain an entire hour long episode. Although I don't know, we're pretty wordy. We could probably talk about like books for an hour. So, but yeah, it's kind of just a fun way to explore all sorts of YA topics. And it means that there's always a new episode every week, which is fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan. It's both that, I mean, I listen to the majority of the book riot related podcasts. So every time it's a new episode day, I get excited. But Leah, I think you had a question that you wanted to.
I do. And then Anna in the chat, one of our other mods, also wants to know, any chance you can spoil what a couple of your favorite books have been so far in 2023?
Oh yeah. So oh my gosh, the new Mindy McGinnis book. Why am I blanking on the title? The Long Stretch of Bad Days.
Yes.
Love that book. I'm a big Mindy McGinnis fan anyway, but that one was one of my favorites because oh man, it's so good. And it's small town, rural, like sort of like the seedy underbelly of like the small town veneer. And I think it was really timely. Like it's about these two unlikely girls who are thrown together and they have to like put together this podcast in order to get the credits that they need to graduate from high school. And so they do it on local history and they investigate their town's long stretch of bad days in which like 3 really awful things happen in like the space of a week in their town. And then they inadvertently uncover like this missing girl case that has like slipped between the cracks and nobody has ever investigated. So I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And then another one of my favorites, and this one just released a couple of weeks ago, is North Ranger by Ray Terciero and Brie Indigo. It is a YA graphic novel. It is a modern day retelling of Northanger Abbey set on a Texan ranch.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was really good.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and it's queer and it's just like all of these like so many great mashups that I didn't even think that like I needed, but then when I saw what it was about, I was like, I need that book, and it did not disappoint.
I'm pretty sure that Leah just went to add it to their TBR.
Yes, immediately.
Multiple tabs open.
You hit so many buzzwords for me, but like then you said queer, and I was like, oh, I'm in.
Yeah. Oh, so
you had me really in all the others, and then that one, and so it's like obviously yes.
That's a very good like leading buzzword for you. When someone's talking about a book, if they start off by saying, "So it's queer," Leah's like, "Okay, I'm interested."
Yeah.
Tell me more.
I was at this independent bookstore, this really great independent bookstore in Wisconsin, right outside of Madison. It's called Kismet Books, and like they have these freebie bookmarks, and on it says like, all I need to know is that it's gay and it slaps. And I was like, can I have 10 of these? Like I love these bookmarks so much.
That's amazing. I love that. Can you I almost was gonna repeat Leah's question. So you mentioned that you also write for Book Riot as well as do the podcast. What does a day in your life at Book Riot look like?
Oh man. Well, Book Riot's kind of like my part-time gig. Like right now I'm working as a public librarian. So like a day in the life looks like I usually get up and my mornings are my writing times. And that's when I do a lot of my creative writing because sometimes I just have to get up and I have to do that first. And then I usually go to work at the public library. I work for a really tiny little library in really rural Iowa. So we have very limited hours, but we are open and it's a fun job. And then when I come home is when I usually do a lot of my Book Riot work. So I do... I podcast every Friday with Erica so we can record and have those episodes ready for you on Wednesdays. I'm usually writing articles about, new YA releases, new graphic novel releases, all sorts of different topics. And then I also do a semi-occurring column on, YA themes. And yeah, and that usually, honestly, that stuff gets done in the evenings because it's a busy life trying to do all the different things, but it's really fun, and I enjoy being able to write and just be like, okay, I'm going to write 800 words on YA books and I'm going to get paid for it. Like that's really cool. Like my 15-year-old self would just be dying at the idea.
That's so cool.
It's, I mean, yeah, a dream.
It
It
really
is.
is.
About
Yeah.
as a kid. Sitting at home, during the summer, I was like, I'm not going to go outside. I'm just going to read books instead.
Yeah.
And
Even
my
as an adult.
Yeah.
But being able to read and write about books professionally,
right.
Yeah.
living the life, and then getting to actually write stories.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate. It's very fun.
Super cool. If I remember correctly, this is something that I think you and I have in common. I believe at one point you wrote an article for Book Riot on book tracking and like book spreadsheets, and I think you might even make the Book Riot
I
spreadsheet.
do make the Book Riot reading log spreadsheets, which is, I'm like, oh, I'm happy to see that you're excited about this. It's like my peak nerdiness right here is, yeah, I was inspired by, a couple of other spreadsheets that people had put together. And I used to be like this diehard, like pencil and paper type person. Like I used to have a notebook and I would like fastidiously record all of my books that I read and the date that I finished. And it was really fun. And I've done this since like 2009. But then at some point, like around 2016, 2017, I was like, wow, it takes a long time for me to count. And I wish that like I had a quick way to like, see how many adult books versus YA books versus children's books, other than like sitting down at the end of every year and then just like tallying them up, by hand. And so I had somebody being like, you could try an Excel spreadsheet. And I was like, that doesn't sound like fun. And then I poked around the internet and some people had some really cool ones. And I was like, okay, so actually I think I could get onto this. And then I started tweaking it to suit my needs. And so many people at Book Riot were interested in it. I was like, well, you can share this. Like, I don't care. Like, this is, if people love it, then I'm happy to share. And it's amazing how many people use it. And it's amazing how many people message me and be like, oh my gosh, I love this. And it's helped out my reading so much. So I have a lot of fun making it, but I also have a lot of fun using it. And in fact, right before I got on, I was like, oh man, do I need to update my spreadsheet? Okay, I'm good.
I am just such a data spreadsheet nerd that I have done a very similar thing for Words and Whimsy and now the Nest in creating a reading tracker that very similarly, I had created one just for myself, and then I saw ones that some other people did and was inspired to add some different tracking things that I maybe wasn't before, like starting to track what publisher and what imprint, even more detailed things like that. And then people were like, well, hey, I'd really love to track my reading. I'm like, here you go. I got you.
Like, let me make you a template. Copy and paste. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it really is. Oh, it keeps me so organized.
Well, I'm like, I never like I always get into these situations too where like somebody will ask me like, what have you read lately? Or I'll be doing like an event like this. And then I'm like, what are books? Like I don't remember lately. So I usually, especially if I'm doing like a virtual event like this, I'll have it up in a tab and I'll be like, well, let me see, what have I read? Because otherwise I'm just terrible on the spot. And it helps me out so much because I could not remember all the things that I read unless I had it. So maybe that's just my brain is Swiss cheese, but it's still helpful to have. And it just makes me happy scrolling through and seeing all the statistics.
Right, exactly. And when you make, the pretty graphs and stuff, oh, it's just so fun. I just love it. So obviously we will talk about the book, but one thing that I wanted to ask before we switch that, because you mentioned being a public librarian. And this is something we can, talk more about offline. But so I recently started working for OwlCrate myself, not just through Words and Whimsy stuff, like actually Team OwlCrate. And one thing that they've been doing a lot of is trying to sponsor summer reading programs for smaller libraries. And so I'd really love to, chat with you about trying to do something for your library for summer reading.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That'd be amazing. I know that, yeah, we have a lot of fun, and I feel like the teen demographic in like library world, and this is, just obviously my personal experience with it. But having worked in a couple of different public libraries in a couple of different areas, teens are really hard to grab sometimes. I mean, like we always have our diehard readers who are just like reading 5 million things. But teens are like so busy, so overwhelmed. And sometimes it's hard to be like, no, come back and read for the love of reading. And we'll give you like fun stuff if you just read. And so it's always really rewarding when we can catch them. But sometimes it's difficult to get teens to, pick up books because they're so into that school mode. So it's always really nice when we can.
Oh, yeah. I mean, our millennial generation, we really benefited, I think, from Pizza Hut giving us free pizza for reading books. I mean,
Yes.
what more does a teenager or preteen and teenager want than pizza?
Right. Like that like instilled in me like read, get fun things like pizza. I wish the Book It program still existed, but then I would eat pizza all the time. And maybe I don't need to eat pizza all the time, but my heart would be happy.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. And I mean, that is something important. You can't, discount that. But so anyway, yes, we will definitely chat more offline about what we can do for a summer reading program. It'd be super fun.
Yeah, thanks.
Leah, would you like to? I looked at your name and I just mashed everything together.
It's
Leah.
okay.
Would you like to transition us?
Absolutely. So first off, Tirzah, happy release week for Manslaughter Park. Like third book in the series. Did you do anything fun to celebrate its release?
Let's see. I mean, this sounds kind of silly. It's like I didn't do anything super special because it's kind of like a weird time to release, like at the end of June. It's 4th of July weekend next week. So this is actually my first event that I've done for the book. So yay. And unfortunately, like we were still being plagued by a lot of like supply chain issues. So my indie did not get copies until just today. So I will go sign them tomorrow, and it will just be a fun fest. I feel like we're just prolonging the release day fun by having the book come out and all the like social media, yay. And now I get to go in tomorrow and feel happy all over again because the book is out.
Yes, that's so cool. That's so cool. In my opinion, you should be able to just like celebrate the release for like an entire month. Just keep the celebrations going.
Yeah,
I have a birthday month.
Yeah, it's some people's birthday months. It's release day month, or release month. Yeah, and it's fun. Like I always enjoy setting up like events and being able to go places and do things. And this is the first time I've ever had a release like so close to like a national holiday. So people were like, well, that week of release is a little bit hard, but like the week after, and I'm like, yeah, that's totally fine because I think like one thing that I learned with like the first book and the second book is you can schedule too many things in like too short of a time period, and like it's really fun when you're in the thick of it, but then like also you come out of it and you're like, I need to sleep for a week. So I'm like, it's okay if I pace it a little bit.
Definitely. Us readers often tend to have some of that introverted vibe. And once you're, out with a lot of people for an extended amount of time, having that time to just decompress at home is really important.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the book. So before we get into like the actual plot of the book and everything, your titles are some of our favorites every year. They're absolutely fantastic. How did you pick the title Manslaughter Park?
My editor came up with it.
Love it.
And I'm like, you're smarter than me when it comes to this stuff. So yes, I love it. But I mean, it's fun to kind of Yeah, it's fun to think about the titles and then think about like words that are associated with murder or murder investigations or crimes, and then just like mash them together. The one book that I've come up with that I have not, or one title I've come up with that I've not had a chance to write yet is, I think Northanger Alibi would be really good.
Ooh,
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
uh-huh,
Yeah. I
uh-huh.
gotta, yeah, that would be really fun. So yeah, it's fun to kind of mess with that. But yeah, in this case, my editor came up with Manslaughter Park and I was like, brilliant. No notes. Like that's what it is. So this was before I even knew if the book was going to contain any manslaughter. I was like, it's gotta be named Manslaughter Park.
Do you think it ended up driving the plot in any way, or
Maybe like slightly because I'm thinking, okay, Manslaughter Park, so there has to be manslaughter in the book, but then we have to figure out like, okay, what is the circumstances of the mystery and the plot so that it is manslaughter. And then when I was doing my research, and this kind of harkens back to like even researching for the first book, the idea of manslaughter was not super prevalent in like the Regency time period for like the court cases and whatnot. It was kind of like you either murder somebody or you don't. Like there is no in between, unless you are like somebody who murders like a member of the noble class or like a royal. Then that's treason, and like you just die. So yeah. So in that case, like sometimes we're playing a little fast and loose with historical detail, but it's still fun.
oh yeah, that I can attest to. All three books are super fun, and a good balance of like, they have enough of a cozy mystery feel. You're not there's no extreme violence on the page or extreme gore on the page, but it does like I like that the mysteries still there's still stakes to it. It
Yeah.
still means something.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, and I do like dark murder mysteries. Like some of my favorite books can get pretty dark. But yeah, when I was writing the series and I was talking with my editor about it, we were kind of like, vibes are going to be everything when it comes to this series. And
Mhm.
people love Jane Austen, but Jane Austen is not like super racy. And when it comes to the romance, and that's fine. I think people love it for like a lot of like the restrained yearning that goes into those
Mhm.
books. And then so we were kind of like, how do we match the vibes? And one comp that we kind of landed on was Agatha Christie, and Agatha Christie can get dark, but
Mhm.
overall she's not super dark. It's
True.
more like she sort of suggests the darkness and like lets the reader kind of put it together. And so we were like, yeah, I think it'd be nice if they aren't super dark, they are a little bit on the cozier side. And it also works out because a lot of like younger teens have been picking them up, and that makes me happy too because
Right.
that's just another entry point into Austen.
Right. Absolutely. And into just more reading in general.
Yeah.
Leah, do you want to pick a book question?
Sure. I'm gonna skip that one and go to this one because I'm like so excited to ask it. So, this novel flips the original on its head by turning it into or adding in a queer reimagining aspect to it. Was it important for you to include queer representation in this novel and in the series now?
Yeah. So, when my editor and I were talking about like revising the first book, and when I was thinking about what I wanted to do with these books, one thing I wanted to highlight is that, like, I think so a lot of times people think Austen is like all white people, all white rich people just kind of having these like yearning, restrained romances and societal stuff. And like I love that stuff, but it sort of paints this picture of Regency England that isn't entirely accurate. Like it sort of makes people assume that like, oh, there weren't people of color in Regency England, or like there weren't queer people. And I was like, I kind of wanted to push back on that a little bit. And so these books really do focus more on like working class and middle class people. Like obviously there are the wealthier set, but there's also women who are like finding themselves in difficult positions of having to either marry or find a way to make their living. And then in Pride and Premeditation, one of the secondary characters, Charlotte Lucas, she is not white. And I just was like, it'd be nice to kind of explore more of like the diversity of Regency England. And I say this like, I'm white, so I don't feel comfortable writing from the point of view of somebody who isn't white, because that's not my lived experience. But also I felt like it was really important that we just try to portray more a more diverse Regency England. And it's interesting because to me, that's like not the unrealistic part of the book. Like these books are sometimes a bit ahistorical and unrealistic in certain historical details, and that's done intentionally just for fun. But like, yeah, the historical England, like Regency England, had a lot of diversity in there. And I'm hoping that I can show at least a small slice of it. So when it came time to write Manslaughter Park, I really wanted Fanny to be queer. And the basis for that is, I don't know if you've ever seen the 1999 Mansfield Park movie with Frances O'Connor. I think that Frances O'Connor and the actress who plays Mary Crawford have this incredible chemistry. Like so much so that like the first time I watched the movie, I was really confused because I was like, are they supposed to be lesbians? Like, are they supposed to like have the hots for each other? Like, I haven't read Mansfield Park yet, but like, I don't think this is like canon, but I like this. And so then I read Mansfield Park and I was like, oh, okay, it's maybe there's like a teeny tiny bit of queer subtext, but maybe I'm reading into that. So that sort of planted a seed in the back of my mind. And so my editor wanted the third book to be Mansfield Park. I was kind of like, it's like not my favorite Austen. I mean, I still appreciate it, and I've learned to really appreciate this book after spending so much time with it. But I was like not exactly as excited as I would have been to like rewrite Emma or Northanger Abbey. But then I thought like, oh, but what if Fanny actually was queer? And that like just lit a fire in me, and I was like, yes. And luckily I was like trying to figure out like, oh man, I wonder if my editor will go for it. And then she suggested it before I even had a chance to bring it up with her. She's like, what if Fanny isn't queer or is queer? And I was like, I think what she said was, what if Fanny isn't straight? And I was like, yes, we're on the same wavelength already. And part of that too is like, I don't like Edmund Bertram. Like, I don't like him at all. I feel like Fanny gets a little bit, she gets jilted in this book because like every other Austen book, you do have like this wonderful romance that feels two-sided, like not all the way through the book, but like at a certain point, you know that both of the characters want each other, and like that moment when they both want each other, it's so wonderful. But at the very end of Mansfield Park, it's like, when the time was right and not a moment sooner, Edmund realized that he loved Fanny, and then they got married. And I'm like, that is it? Like, Fanny deserves better. Mm-hmm. So, and that is actually, the dedication of this book. It is, for everybody who believes, to all the readers who think that Fanny Price deserves better. Yes. Hopefully you will like this book because I had a lot of fun making her queer, and it was just, it's fun to like add that and explore that and what it means to be queer in a historical time period where obviously homosexuality was not accepted, was not socially acceptable, but that doesn't mean that, people weren't happy and people still didn't find, love and happiness in their own way. I think a lot of times people assume that if it's historical and it's queer, it's got to be sad, because how can they ever be together? But that is not always the case. So it was kind of fun to write a happy love story with queer characters in this book.
I was okay. So in the book, obviously there's sort of two potential love interests for Fanny. And right from the start, I was like, I am on one side of this, and this is the right side to be on. And even if it ends up that this is just like a totally platonic, like friendship or a platonic life partnership, whatever this is, I support this because this is better. Yeah. And I am so happy because I have not fully read Mansfield Park, but I have seen the movie
Yeah.
which is like normally not a thing that I do. But I completely agree that Fanny deserved better, and you provided like this is our justice for Fanny book, and I'm very here for it.
Thank you. Hashtag justice for Fanny.
Exactly. And so perfect, I know like you were saying, release date around a holiday weekend is obviously it's different than releasing at another point in the month, but it still is released within Pride Month, which is super exciting.
Yes, I know. I was so happy at first, I was kind of like, oh, this is different because you normally have releases in the spring, and then it was like, oh, summer, this is gonna be totally different vibe. And then I was like, oh, it'll be Pride Month, and that is exciting for my first queer book to be released during Pride Month. Made me very happy.
That is super exciting. I was at a local bookstore here. I'm in Minneapolis, and bookstore was in St. Paul technically, but it is a bookstore owned by queer Black women. And I asked them if they had uh, your book in stock because I had finished reading it. And so obviously I knew Fanny was queer, and they were like, oh, we've got copies of it on the way, I think. And I was like, make sure you're highlighting that this is a great month for Pride Month, even though I know the month's almost over. We read these books all year round. So I was like, make sure you put it up there.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And I'm happy too that it's kind of subtle, but it is like, a queer retelling, like that is listed. And I'm happy that, we are advertising it as such, because I know that, even just like 5 or 6 years ago, it seems like finding queer books was really tough because publishers weren't putting that in the marketing. And I'm sure there's like a lot of complicated reasonings that go behind like the wording that is used in the publisher marketing. I'll be real, like this, like I don't write this, like my editor and their team, they write that. But it was always really nice when it was highlighted as queer, so I would know, because for me that's a selling point. I'm like, yes, I will pick that book up. And there are books that I thought like, oh, those look good, but then I find out that they're queer. I'm like, yes, move that up the list.
Better. Amazing.
Yeah.
So in Mansfield Park, Fanny can be sort of a more passive character. Did you have a hard time converting her into the sleuth that she became?
Yeah, and that was tough because I feel like, with the Austen community, people have very strong feelings about the characters and about like all their character traits and characteristics that make them who they are. And I think like one thing that people really love about Fanny is, even though she is more quiet and she is, meek, like she like sticks to her values. And so therefore her quietness and her meekness are sort of like forgiven, because it's like, she's had a rough time. And I think the first time I read Mansfield Park, I was like, oh, she doesn't do anything. Like there are so many times I just like want to shake her and be like, speak up, advocate for yourself, defend yourself. But then, as I was reading it again for the second time, I was thinking, okay, try to see it from her perspective. Like she was born with parents who have no money, and they clearly like didn't want her. Like they sent her off to her aunts and her uncle, and ostensibly it's because they're giving her a better chance at life. But like it's also like you see when she returns home, like they're not happy to see her, so she's doesn't really feel wanted. And then when she goes to Mansfield Park, like she's not really wanted there. There's like this horribly sad scene in the beginning of the book where her Aunt Norris is like the one who went to bat for Sir Thomas to bring her to Mansfield Park. And Sir Thomas did so thinking like, oh, I'll bring her here. But then like when she's here, like you're going to take care of her, right? And then Aunt Norris is like, no, I'm not going to take care of her. And in fact, like I think you should take care of her, but don't treat her like one of your children, or like she will have, high ideas, and you don't want her to get above her station. And like Fanny overhears this entire conversation at a very young age. And I just started thinking like, how would that affect a person? Like if that's what you were told as a child, like of course when you grow up and you're 18 and 19 and like nobody likes you except for your cousin Edmund, like you're not going to speak up for yourself. And so once I started thinking about it in those terms, I was like, okay, so I do understand Fanny now, and I have more sympathy for her. But then when it comes to like writing a murder mystery, you can't have a sleuth that doesn't do anything. Like you need somebody who's proactive, like and that's kind of like creative writing 101 is like your character needs to do things and make decisions and have autonomy. Because if they don't do anything, the story's not going to move forward. So I was like, okay, so how do I make Fanny do things without like, sacrificing the characteristics that like readers love about her? And so she, as a result, is very much a reluctant sleuth. And she's very reluctantly solving this murder mystery, but she's doing it because she knows it's the right thing to do. Because if she doesn't do it, nobody else will look into the murder of her uncle, and everybody thinks it's an accident, but she's like the only one who's like, I don't think it was an accident. So once I kind of nailed that was a kind of a tricky balance. But once I kind of got my head around her character, then it kind of came a little bit more easily.
Yes. And she also was definitely helped along by a familiar face for readers of the series, which I don't know if it was included like in the, in any blurbs or like in the Dust Jacket side that we would see familiar characters of Lizzie Bennet and Darcy again. But I had no idea going into the book. I had no idea they were returning. And when it was like, I was... like my jaw dropped.
Which I have to say, that is entirely due to readers. That was not originally planned. But what happened was Pride and Premeditation came out, and this these 3 books sold together. It was a 3-book deal, which I was very grateful for, because that meant that Harper wanted all 3 and they wanted me to keep writing, and so I had contract to do all 3. From the very beginning. So the first book came out, and it was announced that there was going to be a second and a third book, and people kept saying like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see what like Lizzie and Darcy do next. And I was like, oh, they're not in Sense and Second-Degree Murder. And at that point, when the first book came out, I'd already written the second book, and I was like, I can't just add them in, like the book is already written. And I was talking with my editor about it. I was like, I feel kind of bad, like people keep expecting Lizzie and Darcy to show up again, and like, but they're not. They're like, these are just kind of standalones and they're self-contained. And my editor, who's very wise, she was like, well, why don't you just like find a way to write them into Mansfield Park? And I was like, or Manslaughter Park. And I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. This is why my editor is brilliant. And that actually ended up working out really well, because they gave Fanny the motivation she needed in the direction she needed to actually go start solving some mysteries and doing some investigation. So it was kind of fun to bring them back, especially in a different context, because you're seeing them through Fanny's perspective and not through Lizzie's perspective.
Right. Oh, yeah. It was a very exciting moment. So I hope there are other people out there who, like me, just completely missed that was going to be a feature and get that super exciting moment of, I never thought I'd see these people again. Hey. It was wonderful. Leah, do you want to ask another question before I keep rambling on about my joy with that?
Yeah. So kind of backtracking a little bit regarding the research you did for this novel, was there anything like while you were doing your research, exploring Mansfield Park, were there any surprising elements that you discovered that you were able to like include into Manslaughter Park?
Well, I always have a lot of fun, doing the research, because it's interesting to see how, like, I come to these books with like an idea of how I think the mystery is going to unfold and how I want things to happen. But then I'll run up into a point where I'm like, oh, I don't know much about this, so I guess I should research this. And then that can kind of give me like new dimensions or new ideas, or I'm like, oh, well, maybe I will do a little swerve this way instead. I'm not thinking of anything off the top of my head that was like super surprising about the research in Manslaughter Park. But one thing that was really fun is I've always been really fascinated by like art, theft and forgeries and scams. And it was really fun to kind of read about like the forgeries and scams of like Regency era England, which was like, it was totally rampant because they didn't have, technology to enforce things. And like, if you were a good artist, like you could get away with so many things, from like, mail fraud to bank fraud. And people really did get away with a lot. And so yeah, imagining like, okay, what if, the Bertrams are these art dealers, and what could happen there, especially if you have somebody like Fanny, who is a very talented artist, who is very pure of heart and does it because she loves art, and she's kind of idealistic in that way, where she's like, art should be this noble pursuit, and she's never really had to think about like how the sausage gets made when it comes to selling art, how artists make their living. And so her eyes are very much opened throughout the course of this book. And there was a lot about, hoaxes and scams and art forgery that I could have put in here, but I had to like sort of dial it back because I was getting a little too enthusiastic there, and I was like, okay, we need to focus. Fanny needs to solve a murder, so that's going to kind of be the focus of the book. But yeah, there was a lot of fun to be had with research on this one.
That was such a fascinating aspect because I know very little about art. I don't know a lot about the art world in general, and then art forgery especially. I was not familiar with, so it was a really interesting addition to the story, I thought.
Okay.
Do you have any favorite artists that you did like some special research into that, or that you wanted to make a mention of in the book?
I did a lot of research about like just the general like a lot of research about art, but like and this was kind of a little bit past the Regency period, but like I really ended up liking a lot of the art of Edmund Blair Luton, who was in the Victorian ages, and he did a lot of like portraits of just like everyday Regency life. And so like a lot of times if you Google like art about Regency life, his art will show up, and it's very compelling and it's very interesting. So even though he would have been, after the Regency period, he was basically doing historical pieces in his lifetime. I find his work really compelling, and it kind of is interesting to see, like, I don't know, just like the different dimensions of Regency life, because he did more than just like, here's a pretty portrait of somebody. You often see these like scenes that are like just caught in a moment of action, or they like a little glimpse in time. And I was very fascinated by a lot of his work. So that was kind of a fun little research aspect too. I also have a friend who's like an literal art history professor. So it was kind of fun to hear her talk about all the different art stuff that was happening in this time period, especially just, between England and France. And this was a time of major upheaval. So really, really fascinating stuff.
Yeah. There's also, without spoiling it as much as I just want to talk about that, there's one little reveal at the end that's art world related, that I won't say any more about, so we don't spoil for the people who haven't had a chance to read the book yet. But I'm sure you probably know what I'm talking about. There's a little reveal that I thought was super fun, and just added to the like the female power, the feminine power, like, of it being a time that is very, male driven, male led. That just, what I'm saying makes no sense to anybody else unless you've read the book. If you've read the book, then you probably know what I'm talking. Maybe. But anyways, I just had to mention that.
I feel like, I make these books, I think, unapologetically feminist. And maybe some people think that is like too overt for Austen, but I do think Austen was very feminist, and she might not have used that word to describe herself, but like all you have to do is read one of her novels to know that she was very concerned and passionate about the plight of women, and how they made their way in a world where basically their only choices were to marry or to not marry. And if you were not born into a family with wealth, then you really had to marry. And if you chose not to marry, then you were basically choosing a life of poverty, which is really difficult. And like, she knew that because she, was born, and she had enough in her family where it seems like, okay, there was enough to go around. She was not especially rich, but she wasn't on the brink of poverty. Her father died, and she and her mom and her sisters were in a really bad place for a while until her older brother stepped in and kind of lifted them up from poverty. And she almost married one. So like I think she was very keenly aware of all of these dynamics, and she writes about them so well. So even if her books don't use the same language that we would use to describe like the feminist movement, like her books are absolutely feminist. So bringing those traits into these books in different ways and sort of looking at aspects of society that we might not consider when we're like thinking about like the romance of Bridgerton is really fun and rewarding for me.
It's a great Easter egg, and I know we have lots of people watching who are all for a bit more feminist themes in our books, female power, all of that.
Yes.
Okay. So I know that both of the last times we've chatted with you, we've talked about the covers of your book, but they are so beautiful and so wonderful, and there are so many little like hidden details in them. So can you tell us a little about the process for the Manslaughter Park cover, and then if you have a favorite cover of the three?
No, you can't make
I know.
That's me.
It's choosing between your babies.
Do it. Oh my gosh. I mean, I was really happy when this one turned out hot pink, because I honestly thought Sense and Second Degree Murder would be hot pink, and then I was like, oh, it's not, but that's fine. And then this one was my hot pink cover, and I was like, yes, I got my hot pink cover. Because yeah, I love the brightness of the colors. And in fact, when this cover, when my editor sent it to my agent and me, I was immediately like, oh my God, I love it. And like my agent loved it too, but I think she was like, it's really bright. And I was like, I don't care. It's going to stand out on the shelf. And like, that's important. And she was like, oh, that's a good point. So, and she loves it too. So we were very fortunate. I mean, I think like a lot of authors, I don't get a ton of say on these covers, which I mean, for me, I got lucky. So I was like, just let the artists do their brilliant work. I'm not going to complain about anything. But yeah, they all kind of have like a common theme, which is that, there's the silhouettes, there's little sort of hints at what you're going to find in the book. And then in the middle, there's usually like there's the penknife, and then there's a skull, and Sense and Second Degree Murder, there's a poison vial. So it's really fun. And at most I will give my editor like a list of objects to include in the cover. So like the necklace is really important in the book. Obviously the paintbrushes, because Fanny is an artist. You see a pistol here that shows up, and a little palette. But yeah, otherwise, the artist, her name's Jessica Ray Phoenix. She goes and she makes these beautiful covers. And then I usually see like a mock-up of just the florals. And if everything looks good, then they send it to a 3D artist who makes it look like actual embroidery. And every time they're stunning. So I'm very fortunate.
The embroidery aspect of it is just the coolest bit. Was that a cattail, Leah? Yes, just as we do.
And again.
I love it.
Yeah, the animal appearances in the chats are honestly the best. They really are. But yeah, the embroidery aspect of it, it's just such a cool, such a cool detail.
It adds so much texture to it, and I think it like takes it to like that next level of like, oh, that's a pretty cover, to like, oh my gosh, is that embroidery? And it kind of gives you a hint at like the time period. So yeah, they're great. I'm so lucky.
They really did a fantastic job with all of them. What do you hope that readers take away from reading Manslaughter Park and your series as a whole?
Well, I guess I hope that readers will, think about like this time period, even though it is ahistorical, and we kind of play fast and loose with some of the details. Like just kind of challenge assumptions about like what Regency England actually was like. It wasn't always, the rich upper crust, Marriage Mart, like that stuff is really fun to read about. Like I love a good Regency romance. But there's so much more that was going on in the time period, especially with like the middle class and the lower classes. Like it's interesting to explore that dynamic. And I also, these are feminist books, and so I hope that readers will feel empowered and inspired by that, even if they are murder mysteries that are inspired by Jane Austen. And that kind of seems like a silly way to go about doing it, but it's fun. I had a lot of fun writing these books, and I hope people have a lot of fun reading them. And if you feel so inclined to like want to check out more Austen or read the original books, like that's awesome too. I'm of the opinion you don't necessarily have to read the classics. Like you can just read retellings or watch a movie adaptation and call it good. Like that's still valid. But I do love the books too. So if somebody says like I read Pride and Prejudice because I read your book, that makes me happy.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Leah, do you want to take a wrap-up question?
Sure. I'm actually going to once again just like mess everything up, but it's like we talked about like this being the first one in the series that's queer. Do you see yourself maybe writing another queer historical fiction book in the future?
I have no immediate plans to write a queer historical fiction book, but definitely more queer books. Definitely. Yeah. And it's like I wrote 2 books that went on submission and didn't sell before Pride and Premeditation, and one of them was queer. So I think sometimes like it still can be a little bit hard to sell queer books in this industry. Some people might be like, how can that be? Because we have so many amazing books coming out now, and it is true. But sometimes they can be harder sells, and I think that there's still so many stories that need to be told. So I'm just excited to hopefully be able to write more queer books. But yeah, it would be fun to write queer historical, because I know that like growing up, I grew up in a very religious household, and that we didn't really talk about queer people. It was kind of like a hushed tone type of thing. And I say that like my family's super supportive and wonderful, and my parents are amazing now. But like that was my reality growing up, and not just at home, but like at school, in society. And so it wasn't until I was like in my 20s that I started to think about like queer people throughout history and queer people throughout time. And like, we didn't just appear in like 1969 with the Stonewall riots and be like, oh, we're here, we're queer, like give us rights. Like, no, we've been around for like generations, decades, centuries. And a lot of those stories have just been glossed over or not told, or purposely buried even, and sort of written over. And so I love reading queer historical fiction, especially queer historical fiction with hopeful or happy endings, because it just goes to show like we've always existed. It wasn't always a tragedy. Like people have been queer and thriving for centuries. And I think we need more of those stories. So yeah, I would love to be able to write more of them. Just no immediate plans, but someday.
Do you have a book that you're working on now, that anything you can tell us about?
I do. So I am working on the revisions for a Lizzie and Darcy sequel. Yeah.
Yay! Yay!
How exciting.
I thought that might make you happy. Yes. So yes, there's going to be 2 spin-off sequels to Pride and Premeditation, starring Lizzie and Darcy. And I'm working on revisions for the first sort of spin-off sequel. And then hopefully he's going to start writing the second one later this fall. But yeah, it should be fun.
Yay! This is so exciting.
How awesome.
Oh, I'm very happy.
Yay.
Leah, did you have a question you wanted to?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Kristen's question.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can readers get signed copies of your books anywhere?
Yes. The Book Vine in Cherokee, Iowa has signed copies. And in fact, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier in the stream, but there was a delay in getting these to the bookstore, and so like they just arrived today. So I have not actually gone to sign them yet. I'm going tomorrow, Friday, like around midday. So if you haven't ordered a signed copy of Manslaughter Park, or if you want to order any of the other ones, they have my other books.
Mm-hmm.
If you go tonight and order online, I will go tomorrow and I will sign them and get them shipped off. And they are pretty good for, they carry my signed copies, usually. However, I am moving very soon. And so this is kind of like a very narrow window. If you want to get signed copies of my books like sooner rather than later, I recommend ordering from the Book Find like today or tomorrow at the latest. So I can get those signed, and then I will be moving. But in a couple of months, once I'm all settled, I will have a new bookstore that we can do signed copies from. But yeah, it'll be like a little brief hiatus where I will not be available until while I'm, packing up everything and moving and then unpacking.
Awesome. Yeah. If everyone go order your signed copy from the Book Vine now. I talked directly to the people at the Book Vine today, so I can attest, also that they are there at the bookstore. They are ready.
There's a link in my Instagram profile. I don't know if you can drop links here, but yeah.
Yes, definitely. We will definitely do that. So yes, Kristen, you can get, I know we ask for one of our helpers with the reading challenge. She loves to get signed copies of like all of the authors that we chat with. So yes, go order yours, Kristen. Otherwise, once you're all settled and everything, we can always, get the name of the new bookstore close to you that will have signed copies, and we can pass that information along to anybody.
And I will always post that on my website too.
Awesome.
I try to keep my website updated with signed copy links and all that good stuff. So yes.
Awesome. Yes, you're super on top of it. So everyone, you will have lots of opportunities. And then the last question, I know it's a repeat question for you, but it's the one we always ask. What advice do you have for our viewers who might be aspiring authors?
Oh, see, and I can't remember what I've said before.
Perfect. Perfect.
No, I think, chase the stories that like make you happy and make you excited to write. So Pride and Premeditation was kind of born out of like, I mentioned that I had 2 books that I wrote and my agent tried to sell and they did not sell. And that was like a 2-year process of me just being very sad about the fact that I couldn't sell a book. And the second of those books was kind of darker and heavier and sadder. And I was just kind of in this place where I was like I don't know what to write that will sell. And that was maybe my downside right there, as I was thinking about like, what could I write that will sell and become published? And when I was so discouraged, I just thought like, I don't want to give up completely, but I can't think about this right now. And so I started writing these books and they seemed really insane. Like as ideas, like murder mystery retellings of Jane Austen. Like who thinks this is a good idea? Who wants this? But like it made me smile and it made me happy and it made me excited to like sit down and write every day. And that is what's important. And like I would say don't worry necessarily about the marketability or like, is this something somebody will want to read? Because the world is big. There are so many readers. The chances are, yes, there will be something like your weird idea that you think nobody will want to read, or like your bizarre mashup. Like there's somebody out there who will want to read it. And what matters is like you want to read it, so you're going to write it. So that would be one piece of advice I would give is pursue those stories that just make you happy.
I think that's fantastic advice because I feel like you can feel when an author really is invested in what they're writing and the story they're telling. You can tell that as a reader. And if you don't love what you're writing about, how are your readers going to feel that?
Exactly. And I think you can tell when an author is having fun with it versus just writing words.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, Tirzah, thank you so much for joining us for a chat again. This has been absolutely wonderful. And now that I know that we get to talk to you again about Lizzie and Darcy, I am just over the moon, excited. It's going to be great.
Yes. Thank you.
So yeah, we definitely will want to have you back again. And obviously I've got some other things to talk to you about, summer reading for your library and all that. So we will definitely chat very soon. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
And thank you, everyone, The Nest, Words and Whimsy, for being here. July, we have got, it's going to be a little different. You're not going to see the huge lineup of author chats all different days. We've got some really exciting things coming. I can tell you that at some point in July, we're going to be chatting with Kim Johnson about her newest release, The Invisible Sun. So I'm very excited for that, and some other super exciting stuff. So just stay tuned in The Nest, both the general feed, the Words and Whimsy feed or page. We'll be updating all of those with the information you need. So thank you so much again, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Take care.
Bye.